Yeah, let's get right into this. What on earth is going on with the Minnesota Timberwolves? The Wolves did start out the season really solid this year, but just a couple losses recently, and this season feels like it's flipped on its head. I will preface this by saying I am a fan of the Minnesota Timberwolves, so anything I say obviously can be taken with a grain of salt because I think all fans um over over exaggerate to either side, either too much of a fan or too against their team. And I'm kind of on the side of maybe being a little too harsh on my team right now, but I really don't think I am being too harsh on them, to be honest. They take a loss to the Lakers to start the season, then they get two straight wins against the Kings and the Raptors. Not the finest wins in the world, but certainly solid. They then go play the Mavericks. The Mavericks have kind of owned them. Luka hits a big shot against them. So what? Beat the Nuggets, lose to the Spurs. It's a back-to-back, fair enough. And then they get into their best stretch of the season, right? They go three straight wins, dominate the Hornets, dominate the Bulls, dominate the Blazers. Those are three teams that they absolutely should be beating, and they take care of business. So as a fan, I'm excited, right? We're going into another three-game stretch that's very, very winnable. We're playing the Blazers twice, the Heat, and then we finally get into a couple hard games with the Kings and the Suns. But overall, I'm thinking, man, this could not be going any better. And then you actually play those games, and it's just ridiculously disappointing. You play the Heat, have the lead in the fourth quarter with about 8 minutes to go, and you just completely fall apart. I believe up 8 with 4 minutes to go. I think up 5 with like 2-3 minutes to go, and you just collapse. You have a really, really bad defensive possession. You have the lead, and you sub out your defensive player of the year, and then they immediately go get an and one right at the basket. You follow that up by having your player, the guy who you need to be taking the last shot, you have him inbounding the ball, and it's just an absolute mess. But it's one of those losses you can say, okay, that was an anomaly, and you move on from it. NBA Cup begins. I think everybody was pretty excited about the NBA Cup this year. Last year was a little bit of a test phase, and I think this year it seems to be a little bit more exciting. But the Wolves go and play, and I'm really excited. As a fan, we're in a relatively easy group this year, especially in comparison to the one we were in last year with, the Kings and the Thunder, and it was just a really, really solid group. This year, we clearly have a little bit of an advantage, and we go and we play the Blazers on the road and get embarrassed, to be honest. Not embarrassed as in lose by 50, but embarrassed in the fact that we're down 15 the whole game to the Blazers. We can't crack this lead. We are down 15 from what felt like, at least as a fan, the third quarter all the way to the end of the game. I mean, we got dominated from start to finish. And fair enough, you have some Blazers coming back having really good games. Sometimes you are just going to lose to the bottom teams in the conference, and that's just a part of the NBA, similar to how the NFL has a saying, any given Sunday, anything can happen in an NBA game. But you're so excited, you're so built up, and the Wolves are considered to be a contender. They really should not be losing to this Blazers team, full health or not. If both teams are fully healthy, it shouldn't matter. The Wolves should be winning this game. It should be a sweep. Like, it should be four. If you play them 4 times, you beat them 4 times. And that was not the case. I was really disappointed as a fan. And I was like, you know what? I wish the loss had happened, on Wednesday instead of happening on Tuesday, because I really wanted to get that in-season tournament win. I think as a fan, I'm really excited to see the first time the Wolves can ever go on an in-season tournament run. And now it looks extremely unlikely that this would be the year for that to happen, although definitely still possible. So it gets to Wednesday, the game starts, and I'm watching from start to finish, and we immediately get up, I think, like 12-2, and then it's 22-12, and I'm just like, okay, this is much more like it. And then once again, it just falls apart in an embarrassing way. You have mistakes that should not be happening. The Wolves have had, to my memory, at least like three in the last week, 8-second violations. And we're not talking getting full court press. The Blazers do full court press, but this was not a full court press. This was DiVincenzo losing track of the clock and just walking up the court and getting an 8-second violation. That cannot happen. That can't happen at the college level, let alone the NBA level. And it's just really, really frustrating. And so I'm trying to take a deep dive into stats and try to figure out what's going on. And I found a couple things that I think could be the issue. And again, I want to preface all these things by saying the Wolves are not a bad team. Like I said, I could definitely be a fan that's overreacting. And the Wolves also are 6-6. Like, we're 500 right now. Granted, we should very likely be, what would that be, 9-3 right now? Because we shouldn't have lost the Heat, and we definitely shouldn't have lost the Blazers twice. So we should very likely, and could very likely be 9-3 and be sitting tied for the 3 seed right now in the Western Conference, and instead we're sitting at 11th, and if the season ended today, we'd be out. Although I think it's very unlikely that we do end up finishing out of the play-in or the playoffs entirely. I think the one player I want to talk about the most in terms of underwhelming seasons is Dante DiVincenzo, and I mean, it's no questions asked, been a disappointment as a fan. He had a great preseason. I was really excited. I think he had a big game early on. I can't remember who it was against. Let's look at the box scores here, actually. Here we are. Against Chicago and against Portland, he had 14 and 13. Relatively efficient from three for shooting so much volume, but certainly not exactly what you want to see, but something you can be okay with and be like, you know what, he's a bench scorer. He's going to have good nights. He's going to have bad nights. But you take a look at the season-long stats, and man, I mean, it's ugly. I can't lie. Under 10 points per game, which, again, fair enough. His minutes per game did jump back down to the last time he was under 10 points per game in his career, which was with Golden State. It's not that he doesn't have the opportunity at all. It's just simply the efficiency. If you look at his two-point efficiency, it's down 8% from 54 all the way to 46. You look at the three-point percentage. Last year, he was a 40% shooter on the dot. Actually, last two seasons, he's been a 40% three-point shooter on the dot. He's down to 30 right now. Again, very early. Free throw percentage also slightly down. Last year he shot 75%. This year he is up to 78. But you take a look back at his career, 84, 85, 84, 82, and he's still down. So I'm very worried as a fan because you know that when you have these bench pieces, they're going to have stretches that just aren't good. That's part of being a fan. Naz Reid is going to have games where it's just ugly. The same way Anthony Edwards is going to have games where it's just ugly. But this is consistent bad performance, topped off by his worst performance, I would say, of the season last night, going 1 for 10, 0 for 6 from 3 against Portland. One of the worst teams. He had open looks time and time again. Now, Dante DiVincenzo, of course, does take some deep threes. He does take some contested shots. But a lot of these shots that he's missing, I'm like, man, I mean, these are walk up, step in, wide open catch and shoot threes. The stuff you saw him absolutely cashing in the playoffs last year. With the Knicks last year, with the Warriors a couple seasons ago. So it just sucks. Moving on to another guy who is definitely not been underwhelming. Let me absolutely preface this by saying Anthony Edwards, who I'm going to talk about, absolutely not been underwhelming. But let's get into what the problem becomes after the Cat trade happens. So the Wolves move on from Cat, which makes Anthony Edwards very clearly the number one option. I don't think anybody is disappointed in that. I think everybody's excited to see it. His scoring has taken a jump this year all the way up to 27 points per game, 27.8. So it actually was at some point near 30 because the last couple games he has dipped down a little bit. But the problem with getting rid of Cat was he was a very sure 40% three-point shooter. It is very rare that Cat has nights where from three-point range specifically, he is just inefficient. And on the other hand, is a very, as it was described years ago by Jim Peterson, a Wolves secondary commentator, it was very, very accurately described as a home run hitter. Anthony Edwards can go on 9-0 runs by himself so fast. Just like that, he has the big poster dunks, energizing plays, energizing runs. At the same time, he has almost what I would call the D'Lo effect for all you Lakers fans out there, where he can just kill a play. He can just absolutely kill a run, a stretch, anything. And last night was one of the nights where he was a killer for the team. He still was fine. The team was overall even in plus minus with him on the court. I think, it was -1. -1 with him on the court. That's, when you lose a game by 8, -1 isn't necessarily a bad thing. But when you look to even a few nights before, playing Chicago on the 7th of November, 5 for 9 from 3. Playing Portland the following night, 9 for 15 from 3. Playing Miami the next night, we're down to 4 for 14. And then he has an okay game against Portland, hitting 4 threes in the game that they lost in the in-season tournament. But then you get all the way to last night, and it's 10 for 25. You're like, okay, not the worst thing in the world. 40% from a guard. Nights are going to happen like that. Then you look at three-point percentage, 0 for 9. 0 for 9. And that brings his three-point percentage down significantly. And yes, he's still shooting 42%, and Ant is going to get MVP votes this year. He's going to have a career-high three-point percentage. But I don't think that these are all going to be positive things overall. For Anthony Edwards, for his development, for his success, absolutely. Anthony Edwards is going to have a phenomenal season this year. He's going to be one of the best players in the NBA. But at the same time, we're also going to have an Anthony Edwards who's going to have really bad nights that's going to cost the Wolves games against bad teams. Sometimes he's going to have nights that it's going to save them against good teams. Some nights he's going to have nights where he's going to lose them games against bad teams. And that's what we saw last night. He lost them a game. And you could even go back to the Miami game, 4 for 14. I mean, that's 28% from 3, 8 for 24 overall. He was a +2 in the box score in a 1-point loss. But that's not what you want to see. 6 turnovers as well in that Miami Heat game. That's his worst game score in the last 5 games. That's his next closest game score is 15, and he had an 8 that night. I mean, that's not good at all. He had very, very negative impact on that game overall, and that's the problem. Ant is going to be phenomenal this year, but for the Timberwolves' success, him being the number one option every single night, with very rarely a performance from a Julius Randle. We have seen Julius Randle specifically against the Kings on their second game of the season have a night where he can be the one to lead the team to a win. But you're not going to have that ability as much as you did with Cat. When Cat was there, it was always going to be like, if Ant has 30, that's just an added bonus because we know Cat's getting 20. We know Cat's shooting 3 for 7 from 3 at worst, or 2 for 7 from 3 at worst. That's the worst performance you're getting out of him. And you don't have that backbone, that savior anymore. And I think it's overall costing the Timberwolves. Let's get to a more positive note on why I think the team overall is going to be okay. They're 6-6, like I said, and in a stacked Western Conference where a few wins here and there could alter the difference between being the 3 seed and being the 8 seed, it's not necessarily a thing to panic about. It is a little bit worrying when you talk about the fact that they just lost 3 straight games to teams that they absolutely should have beaten, and like I said, those wins can be important. But overall, the stats do favor them actually being okay and being fine when they get out on the end of this. Offensive rating for the Minnesota Timberwolves, I believe, actually is up from last year. They are 12th. I believe last year they were smack dab in the middle at 15. Again, very early in the season, there's a lot of three-point shooting going on with the Wolves, as I think there is for many of the teams in the NBA this season, specifically the Cavs and the Celtics. But the three-point jump and the efficiency for the Wolves certainly looks to be a good one. The problem is the turnovers. So if the Wolves can fix a turnover problem, offensively, they look completely fine. And you go defensively, are they the number one defense in the NBA no more? No. And I don't think they're going to be. I think it's comfortably going to be the Thunder. I don't think anybody's really going to put up a competition. But they also still have a perfectly competent defense. They currently have the 8th best defense by rating in the NBA, on par or comparable to the Cavs and the Celtics, who are currently the number 1 and number 2 seed out east, and very likely going to be Eastern Conference Finals contenders when we get to the playoffs in April and May. So, how can you be disappointed at that? Well, the record. That's how you can be disappointed. Stats only mean so much. Stats can be a thing to understand why something is happening. For example, if I were to look at Anthony Edwards after game 1, which this is not true, and say he shot 0% from 3, and I look at Anthony Edwards' season and go, wow, career low 0% from 3. That can be taken as true, but when I mention he's only played 1 game, that's how you kind of get to the ability to mess with stats. And like I said, all the stats I've mentioned in the video today, DiVincenzo's efficiency, Ant's efficiency, could go up, could go down. It's an 82-game season for a reason. We're only 12 games in. We still have another, 6/7 of the season to go. We are still so early in this season. However, it's important to check in with these stats throughout the season to make sure we're not being fooled. For example, if I were to say Anthony Edwards shot 50% from 3 this year, you'd go, wow, that is really, really good. But if you look game to game and Anthony Edwards is shooting 0 for 10 and then the next game shooting 10 for 10, overall, it's kind of not 50%, you know what I mean? So it's important to take a deeper dive at these stats. So Ant is 42% from 3 this year, but the nights where he's off, he is costing his team games. The nights where he's on, he's sometimes saving his team and getting them wins that they otherwise wouldn't have. So taking a deeper dive at the stats, I think, is really important. And that's, I think, what the importance of the offensive rating is here, and the defensive rating as well. The Wolves, right now, if you compare them, the teams better in defensive rating. There is 1, 2, 3, 4 Western Conference teams better in defensive rating right now. Offensively, Western Conference teams better than them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 8. So you take the median of that, and they're essentially a 6 seed. If you take the median of the offensive and defensive rating and put them together, they would be roughly the 6 seed. And if we go into actual net rating, we could find what seed they would technically be projected to be at. So overall, I think they're going to be fine. And that was the main point of why I ended the video with this, because I did just talk so much about how there's struggles going on with this team, but if you take a look at the underlying stats, I do think they're going to be okay, and I definitely am overreacting as a fan to a 6-6 team when there's teams like Milwaukee and Philadelphia who are struggling to, go out there and beat the Pistons, like he took a 59-point game from Giannis the other night. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below about the Minnesota Timberwolves. As always, any opinion is okay. If you guys completely agree with me, completely disagree with me, I'm okay with hearing whatever. I'm just here to talk basketball, voice my opinion to you guys out there. And yeah, hopefully the Wolves can improve as a fan. I'm really, really hoping we can get back to, that top 3 seed, that Western Conference contender that we were a season ago. And I think that will happen. but it certainly doesn't look good as we continue on throughout the season.